It is Sunday, the 20th of March, 2016. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church in Montreal, starting up my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which include, but are by no means limited to, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. To borrow two choice phrases from the arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letters that the Reverend Dr. Peter Morales, or perhaps I should say the Reverend Dr. Peter Beyond Belief Morales, UUA administration, had me served with in an effort to cover up and hide the fact that certain Unitarian Universalist ministers are in fact guilty of engaging in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. But that's actually comparatively recent history. My protest has always included, or almost always included, an element of protesting against clergy sexual misconduct. But it actually began as a protest against the anti-religious intolerance and bigotry that I and far too many other people have encountered in Unitarian Universalist churches. I just saw an SPVM police car drive by, but I suspect it's just driving by. In fact, I see it turning right and heading off, so I don't think it was anything to do with this protest. But, you know, since it did happen and drive by, you know, one of the issues is that rather than dealing responsibly with the issues that I'm protesting against, the Unitarian Church of Montreal has chosen instead to repeatedly call in very questionable complaints to the SPVM about my protest in an effort to get the police and the justice system to force an end to it. You know, instead of saying, okay, we got a problem here, let's talk to Robin and see how we can resolve, you know, the problems. The Unitarian Church of Montreal has pretty well, certainly since 1999, certainly since my protest began in 1998, has just refused to enter into any kind of dialogue towards resolving the issues. And instead, as I said, they've repeatedly called in complaints, usually, you know, baloney complaints, sometimes outright false, borderline criminal complaints, i.e. the complaint that they're making against me is so false that it would constitute the criminal act of public mischief if they tried to have me charged. And in fact, there's been one or two instances where I believe I've actually had grounds to bring public mischief charges against certain Montreal Unitarians for bringing completely false accusations against me. But it seems the police don't like to act on such complaints, i.e. complaints about people bringing false accusations to the police. So far, nobody's actually been charged with public mischief, but I have video evidence that I think more than adequately shows that certain Montreal Unitarians have told outright lies to SPM police officers in an effort to have me arrested on false criminal charges so that they can then you know, get some kind of restraining order to prevent me from protesting. I also even have some documentary written evidence of statements made by Montreal Unitarians that are very, very questionable and you know, seeking to have me arrested on bogus criminal charges in an effort to force an end to my protest. So just walking back and forth here as we were supposed to do. I began the video by showing the wayside pulpit here. I like to sometimes refer to it as the wayward pulpit, because very often what's written on this wayside pulpit is so out of alignment with what Unitarian Universalists, well, no, what I'm actually, what's written is actually, oh, here's another police car, so I don't know what's going on. Just got another one going by. And we'll see what happens with that one. That's twice now, within a matter of a few minutes. Again, it could just be they're just routine driving by, got absolutely nothing to do with my protest. They've certainly, they've certainly reduced their interactions with me in the wake of several false accusations made by Unitarians, and also several embarrassing incidents where the SPVM police officers overstepped their authority in trying to shut down my protest. I mean, there's really zero justification for the police to even try to shut down my protest. It's not their job to shut down my protest. In fact, it's their job to uphold my right to exercise my constitutionally guaranteed civil rights and freedoms. Good day, sir. Oui.
C'est quoi le problème avec cette...
Oh, il y a plusieurs problèmes, mais entre autres, ma manifestation a commencé quand le pasteur de l'église m'a traité comme psychotique parce que je réclame une expérience religieuse. En plus de ça, il a traité une fête interreligieuse que j'ai organisée avec plusieurs autres religieuses. En anglais, il a utilisé le mot cult. OK? En français, c'est ça, like, temple solaire. C'est ça, exact. C'est très péjoratif. C'est comme accuser quelqu'un d'être une sorcière.
Voilà. Yeah, I know.
Alors, OK, you speak English or French?
Both,
Both?
actually.
Oh, so do I. What would you prefer to speak?
Like you want.
OK. Alors, vous êtes francophone?
Yes.
Oui, c'est ça, c'est clair. On va procéder en français.
I don't have a lot of time.
Non, mais...
But I was just interested.
Alors, c'est ça. Ça, c'est le préjudice, la bigoterie dont je parle. Mais ça a évolué depuis ça. À cause de ça, j'ai contacté d'autres membres de l'Église ailleurs pour discuter qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour avoir un peu de justice. Puis ils ont commencé à parler de les abus sexuels de l'Église. Ils disent « Oh, il y a des choses beaucoup plus pires que ça. » oui. Ils ont parlé des choses, des gens violés, pédophilie, etc. Alors, moi, j'ai pas parlé beaucoup de ça, mais j'ai quand même ajouté ça à mon proteste. Puis j'ai un blog aussi où j'ai parlé de ça. Puis en 2012, j'ai reçu une mise en demeure de l'Église aux États-Unis. Le bureau, c'est à Boston. Ils ont engagé un avocat ici à Montréal pour m'accuser de le crime. C'est un crime de libelle blasphématoire. Ça veut dire, on a une loi contre la blasphème au Canada. Puis
But they're the one who do it.
Bon, right. Moi, ici, au niveau local, je ne suis pas au courant d'abus sexuels. C'est plutôt d'autres églises aux États-Unis, etc. Mais moi, j'ai parlé de ça sur mon blog. Puis le bureau chef aux États-Unis, ils ont engagé un avocat ici à Montréal pour m'accuser de blasphème.
They have things to hide.
Of course. C'est ça, exact.
Well, I support you, man.
OK, merci beaucoup. Moi, je n'ai... So that was a good little franglais conversation, mostly French, actually. But that's what happens in Montreal. You might have a conversation that mixes both French and English, and because that went so well, and basically does illustrate the points that I'm trying to make, which is that the public, when they know the facts, they're not stupid. They can figure things out. They know that I actually have very good reason to protest against the church, and they see right away, when the church accuses me of blasphemy for blogging about pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, well, the public go, oh yeah, I guess the church doesn't want people to know about that. They got something to hide. There's more than meets the eye, So this guy that I was speaking to, young guy, never seen him before, by the way. It's not someone I've spoken to before. He gets it right away. He doesn't have any illusions about the church. The church can't pull the wool over his eyes. So I think I'm going to end this clip a little bit sooner than I might otherwise to keep it reasonably short. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep it running. But yeah, I just want to remind that the date is the 20th of March, 2016. Besides being the official spring equinox, it is Palm Sunday, the day when Christians celebrate Jesus entering Jerusalem just prior to his execution by the Romans. And actually, well, since that's okay, this is quite interesting, and it ties in. In December of 2000, December 4th, I believe, it might have been 5th or 6th, but anyway, early December 2000, I was protesting in front of the Unitarian Church in Montreal when a SPVM police car pulled up. There was one officer in it. His name was Anthony Pompa. And he basically told me pretty well immediately that I was under arrest, which came as a complete surprise to me because just a couple of weeks previously there'd been a SPVM van that had, watched me for about 20 minutes, and it was parked on the other side of the street there, about where those trees are. And so at a certain point, I went over to the police van and asked the guy, I said, is there a problem? Is everything? Oh, no, everything's fine. He basically said, you're doing everything correctly. In other words, I was, according to him, everything I was doing was well within my rights, which I've always tried to do. I've always tried to protest within the general guidelines for peaceful public protest. I think my protest is one of the most peaceful public protests in Montreal. And so like 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks before my arrest, I'm being told, oh no, everything's fine. And then 2 weeks later, out of the blue, I'm arrested. And immediately, the guy just came and said, you're under arrest kind of thing. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I said, well, what am I under arrest for? And he said, public nuisance. It turned out that there's a section of the Canadian Criminal Code that prohibits disrupting the order and solemnity of church services. So there's a section of the Canadian Criminal Code, I believe it's 176.3, that essentially says, you cannot disrupt the order and solemnity of a church service. Which brings us back to Palm Sunday and Jesus' antics in the temple. Essentially, what did Jesus do? He, after going into Jerusalem, he went to the temple, and apparently with a whip, at least according to some of the testimony in the Bible, he had a whip, and he essentially engaged in trashing the area where the money changers were changing money and so on, and selling sacrificial doves and stuff. Not right in the temple itself, but outside the temple. Jesus had a less than peaceful public protest. Let's put it in those terms. And a little bit later, he was arrested, and a little bit later, he was executed. And it seems to me that, knowing what I know about the Romans and society at that time, I think there's probably a direct link between Jesus' not so peaceful public protest at the temple and his arrest and execution. So essentially, I was arrested on probably very similar charges. I was arrested for disrupting the order and solemnity of church services. So oh yeah, there goes one of the hypocrites walking in. One of the members of the church who does their very, very best to ignore the protest, pretend it's not happening, pretend it has no validity, and so on. But anyway, getting back to things, I was arrested for allegedly disrupting the order and solemnity of church services. to make a long story short, because I've related it before in other protests, other videos, I was acquitted. You know, the Crown prosecutor could not prove a single one of the 4 or 5 points of law that he needed to prove. I made it clear in my cross-examination of the church's prosecution witnesses, specifically Val Bourdon and Montreal City Councillor Jeremy Searle, who I believe put a fair bit of pressure on the police to have me arrested. So I think, yes, I'm saying that I think Jeremy Searle abused his power as a Montreal City Councillor by pressuring the police to arrest me. But yeah, as we can see here, this is the sanctuary of the church, and the windows are very narrow, high off the ground. Essentially, I cannot be seen. Likewise, I cannot be heard. And likewise, no service was ever actually disrupted as a result of my protest. Yes, some people, you know, feel emotionally uncomfortable as a result of my protest, but you know, protests are supposed to make people feel emotionally uncomfortable. You know, if you're in your church service and you're feeling uncomfortable because somebody's protesting outside, well, that's, you know, one of the desired effects, but it's not a disruption of the church service. So this was just incredibly hypocritical, incredibly cynical misuse of the Canadian Criminal Code by Montreal Unitarians in an effort to shut down my protest. So, you know, and that's not the only time that they've done something like that. But essentially, it's just one example out of several others. I'm not saying they do this like every week or every month, but certainly over the course of my protest, there's been 3 or 4, you know, 5 or 6, depending on how you want to count it. Well, actually, no, it's probably even more than that when I think of the smaller ones, where you know, Unitarians have tried to bring false accusations against me in an effort to shut down my protest or censor and suppress me.